Good morning, everyone. It's now 10 o'clock, and welcome to week 2 of the examination of the City of London's local plan, the City Plan 2040. Can everybody hear me? Good. My name's Jameson Bridgewater, and I'm a Chartered Town Planner. I'm joined with my colleague, Alistair Phillips, also a Chartered Town Planner, and we've been appointed by the Secretary of State under Section 20 of the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act 2004 as amended to hold this examination into the soundness of the City Plan 2040 and to produce a report on our conclusions in regard to soundness. With us today is Charlotte Glancy. She makes everything tick. She looks after the administration of the examination. If you need any assistance, Charlotte will help you and she'll look after you. Okay. We're not expecting a fire alarm today. Okay. So if there is a fire alarm, we're to follow the council officers and they'll make sure we are safely removed from the building and deposited a safe distance away. Okay. Okay, so last week, not last week, when we were last here, that was on March, beginning of March, end of March, beginning of April. We dealt with the legal requirements and overarching issues in the spatial strategy of the plan. We talked about housing and the policies relating to housing and offices, and then we talked about the policies relating to retail, culture and visitors, and design. The discussions were really helpful to us, and we really enjoyed being here, and the information that we were provided with helped us. We also carried out supplementary site visits on that week, and we'll talk about that as we move on. So this morning, today we're going to be dealing with the council provides with a recap in terms of anything that's changed or anything that's moved forward since we were last here. Then we're going to, I hope you all spotted my deliberate mistake. We're going to be looking at the chapter that's health, inclusion and safety, not healthy and inclusive cities, because that's the first policy. So we're dealing with policies S1 and then policies HL1 to HL9, and I'll be leading that discussion. And then we'll be doing main matter 11, which is a safe and secure city, and that's policies S2 and SA1 to SA3. And then Alistair will be leading on open spaces and green infrastructure. So policy S14 and then OS1 to OS5. Okay, is everybody clear about that? It is a bit of a squeeze in here. So what we'll do is at the end of each of the main matters, we'll have a break. You can go and stretch your legs. We'll have a sort of 15-minute break. We will also build in a sort of, I think the corporation laid on coffee, didn't they? And they did lay on croissants in the first week, but we weren't eating enough. So we're only having biscuits this week, I understand, which is very good for my waistline. So that's good. And then we'll have a break, and then obviously we'll see where we go. We may break for lunch, but if we get to the point where it's more sensible to crack on, we'll crack on. Is everybody okay with that? I won't bother going around the table doing introductions. You can introduce, if you haven't been here before, introduce yourself as we go along. Okay, so can I just invite the council to provide us with an update on, if anything, they've been working on while we've been away, and I'll leave it to them.
Thank you, Inspector Bridgewater, and great to have people here today. Welcome on behalf of the City of London Corporation to those in the room and to those who are watching online. Since the hearing sessions a few weeks ago, 2 new documents have been produced and added to the examination documents webpage and to our physical examination library. Document LD29, that's the list of modifications covering those matters that have been discussed at hearing sessions to date. These consist of the relevant proposed changes previously set out in document LD26, as well as any changes that were agreed during those examination hearings. The second document is document LD30. This is a housing delivery and trajectory note that was produced following discussions at the examination hearing on day 2. That was informed also by discussions with the Home Builders Federation as requested by the inspectors. Work is ongoing regarding heritage and tall buildings in preparation for the hearings that are forthcoming in June, covering matter 7. As discussed previously, the City Corporation are producing an addendum to the Strategic Views Impact Assessment and the Heritage Impact Assessments, and that will set out and assess the proposed changes to tall building contours and the addition of a tall building site to the north of Liverpool Street Station. This document will be published in the next few weeks, well in advance of the June hearing sessions. Work is well underway on that piece of work, and we're confident about being able to produce that within the timeframe discussed previously. The City Corporation has also held meetings with key stakeholders in relation to heritage and tall building matters and have shared images of key views with those stakeholders for their feedback. We're doing this as collaboratively as we can, and we are also discussing potential further policy changes and are hopeful that these will result in closer alignment on some of the issues that have been raised to date. This process is ongoing, and updated statements of common ground will be produced also in advance of the June hearing sessions. And that's it from me in terms of the update. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any comments need to bring to our attention who is here in the week one from representatives? Okay. Okay, so if I can turn your attention to the questions that we've set out in the main matters. It's main matter 10, so it's health, inclusion and safety. And okay, so it's policies S1 to and HL1 to HL9. Okay. So are the requirements for a health, inclusion and safety set out in policies S1 and HL1 to HL9 justified by appropriate available evidence having regard to national guidance and local context, and are they in general conformity with the London Plan?
Yes, the requirements of the City Plan policies relating to health and inclusion are justified by appropriate evidence and have regard to national guidance, local context and London Plan policies. The policies of the City Plan align with several of the paragraphs of the MPPF covering social interaction, cultural, social and recreational needs of the community, educational facilities, infrastructure such as health facilities, libraries and adult education services. The policies of the plan are also in alignment with the London Plan approach to ensuring health and community needs are met, ensuring a sufficient supply of educational services and childcare opportunities, encouraging sport, play and recreation opportunities, promoting free and accessible toilet provision and changing places, as well as improving air quality and minimising noise disturbance. Strategic Policy S1, which expands the strategic objective of the Plan 1.3, sets out a high-level vision for improving the health of the city's communities by providing a broad range of facilities and improving the environment. This vision is clearly expressed through policies HL1 to HL9, which support development that promotes healthy lifestyles, reduces health inequalities, enables health, social, educational, sports facilities, as well as improving air quality and noise nuisance. City Plan Policy HL1 seeks to enable buildings and spaces that are inclusive and promote social interaction. Policy HL2 builds on London Plan policy by advising developers to manage the impact of the development on air quality in the city and comply with guidance in the city's air quality SPD. Policy HL5 supports the London Plan by seeking to ensure health and community needs are met in local areas. The health and inclusion policies do not, however, operate in isolation, as they deal with wide-ranging, cross-cutting issues and are not the only policies in the City Plan dealing with health and inclusion. The policies are largely implemented through other corporation strategies, such as the Air Quality SPD and Noise SPD, Education Strategy, Joint Strategic Needs Health Strategy, and Education and Sports Strategies. The City Plan has also been informed by a health impact and equalities assessment. The main objective of these two assessments was to provide the corporation with information to support policy formulation. The formulation of city plan policies has also been informed by the Infrastructure Delivery Plan, which considers the current and future needs for facilities and services that enable and support healthy lifestyles. Thank you.
Reverend Jorgensen.
Thank you very much. I'm Laura Jurgensen. As well as being rector of St Botolph's Aldgate, I am the area dean of the city, and it's in that capacity that I am here to introduce my colleagues. And we would just want to talk a little bit about churches. We talked a lot about what the churches are doing for culture in the city. We're now going to talk about all the different things that churches do related to healthy and inclusive city. Churches are not just there for the congregation, although that's of course important. The priests are not there as chaplains to the congregation. Priests are there and communities are there to be part of responding to their own context. So there are churches across the city, each responding in this area in different ways. And it's really important to note then that the people who are coming to the churches are people who are city workers, city residents, and people who find themselves in the city. As parish priests, I really notice the uptick. I've been a parish priest for 15 years in the city, the uptick of issues around loneliness and mental health amongst the city workers. And so there are lots of different ways that the churches respond to that. And I'd like to introduce Matt, who is working with us to talk a bit more about that.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Inspector Bridgewater. I'm Matt Peacock, Associate of Counterculture. You will have met one of my colleagues in a previous matter, Stephen Eskret. We're a multidisciplinary consultancy firm supporting arts, culture and heritage organisations around the country. We're currently working with the City of London churches and the London Diocese on the future sustainability of their community, culture and faith work in the context of their heritage buildings. Outside my work at Counterculture, I also have 20 years of experience working professionally at the front line of homelessness, and I bring that perspective also to the matters today. We welcome seeing that places of worship are recognised as one of the social and community facilities in 3.6.0, as defined in the City Plan's glossary. We welcome the recognition in 3.6.2 that places of worship have the potential to accommodate a range of activities on their premises, which can help improve community cohesion, and would add that many churches and most churches already do this. However, we feel that the role of the churches and indeed other cultural heritage, community and faith organisations could be much better recognised in a number of areas of the plan if additional and appropriate evidence is considered. We feel that the current evidence base and how it feeds into the city plan overlooks the role of the city churches and other organisations play in health and inclusion. We will take a moment to suggest some of the ways the churches already contribute to the life of the city in this regard, and some additional evidence that should be considered to justify some additional minor amendments to the policies we're discussing today. These are examples of how the evidence base could be improved. On page 7, section 2.8 of the Health Impact Assessment that determines the themes assessed when talking about safe and vibrant neighbourhoods, these ignore the contribution of existing culture, heritage and faith facilities, and that these should, where possible, be recognised and protected in the policies. However, a deeper dive into the evidence does explicitly recognise the health contribution of these facilities. This can be found on page 27 of the Health Impact Assessment and page 29 of the Equality Impact Assessment, which within sections C6, policies CV1 and CV2 recognises the positive health and equality impacts of visitor, arts and cultural facilities. So, in summary, the detail of the evidence base is not reflected in the summary of the evidence base, and therefore we feel has been overlooked in the policies. Secondly, community feedback on pages 13 and 14 of the Health Impact Assessment emphasises the importance of the community of promoting places to relax and rest, cultural and historic attractions,
spaces for social cohesion, including community centres and cultural institutions, improved wayfinding and diversions from busy roads, and street level access. A long list. All of these are offered for free every day by many of the churches within the city, which is not acknowledged in the city plan. C, a further omission from the evidence base is any further detail behind the reference in section 3.1.0 to the third of the city's distinct populations as defined in the City Corporation's Joint Health and Wellbeing Strategy, Rough Sleepers. Looking at the following strategic policies: S1, Healthy Inclusive City; HL1, Inclusive Building and Spaces; HL5, Location and Protection of Social and Community Facilities; and HL6, Public Toilets. None of them make any further reference to the hidden population and the importance of supporting and protecting existing community organisations, including a number of the churches who support and care for them. For homeless people, churches are a lifeline. It's one of the only places they can walk in without being stopped, having bags checked, and use the facilities and the space for reflection and whatever they want. My colleagues, Tim Crossley, you heard from Laura Jurgensen, Father Nick Mosthead and Dr. Howell Davis will now introduce themselves and elaborate on these points. Then we'll return to specific policy amendments we'd like to suggest at the end.
Okay. Can I just ask you a question before because obviously this is, it's very clear that the churches in the city and obviously elsewhere in the country provide these facilities, this support, these services. But is there anything in the plan that has been that the council's proposing? Is there anything in the policies that stops the churches from delivering those services, that support to the community? Is there anything that's fundamentally wrong with the plan? Because our remit is very, very tight in terms of what we can do. We're here to examine soundness and legal compliance. And whilst we note that the churches potentially would like a higher profile within the plan, that was my reading of it from when we were here in the first week. Is there anything are there anything specifically in those policies that is, in the way those policies are drafted, stops the churches from delivering those services or those facilities?
I think if I may, the issue really is that if the church's roles outside worship is omitted, but other institutions are there, Bevis Marks is mentioned, and a lot of cultural institutions, that I think the assumption can be made, therefore, that the churches aren't fulfilling those roles. And then the danger, this being a top-line document, is that there's no follow-through in the granular detail. So that if we're able to, and we're making just 2 amendments to this matter, suggested amendments, that if the churches are mentioned, that will follow through into some very helpful ways that the churches can contribute to this excellent city plan. So it's about not reinventing the wheel as well.
So to be clear, it's almost because you read the plan and Bevis Marks is quite prominent in the plan, isn't it? Whereas, a sort of a lay, sort of not, but obviously when you read the plan, the churches aren't given that recognition. Is that and obviously it's a signposting to the services and the facility that you provide, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And I think we discussed this in the first week, didn't we, Mr. McNichol, about these wouldn't be necessarily main modifications. These would potentially be modifications that the corporation may wish to take on as additional modifications in terms of they're not necessary. I've obviously read the representations. I'm not convinced they're necessary. Well, I hear what you have to say fully, but I'm signposting you now in terms, I don't think they're necessary for sounders, but it may be something where you could reach an agreement with the corporation about giving greater prominence to the services and the facilities that you provide. So we could probably cut to the chase and go straight to the 2 areas where you're suggesting amendments. Then we can take a view, and then if anybody else wants to sort of dive in and make their point on that.
I think that'll be very helpful because my colleagues will have a lot of extra detail to add.
I get the feeling from the first week, and obviously I don't think you were here the first week, but from the first week, I think the corporation were very happy to make those additional modifications. So I don't think we're going to have an issue. Okay.
So shall I mention the amendments first, and then we can go to my colleagues. So the specific policy amendments relating to question 1, we'd like to suggest a modest and meaningful change to the plan, which we feel would result from a more comprehensive and better integrated evidence base. Specifically turning to strategy policy S1, healthy and inclusive city, we'd like to suggest 2 additional points. An additional point 14, supporting facilities for the population's engagement with faith, including through consideration of the impact of developments on existing places of worship. And additional point 15, supporting facilities for the population's engagement with arts, music, culture and heritage, recognizing the contribution of these to health and well-being. And then just a general final point, we'd like also the city plan to review and clarify the consideration to rough sleepers through this matter, including recognition, protection and integration of existing support offered by the churches and others, and the impact of the developments of this hidden community, particularly because it's a priority group and they're not followed through the city plan, in our opinion. May I pass on to another colleague? Great. So, Tim?
Yes, thank you. My name is Tim Crosley. I worked in the city as a lawyer for 23 years. I also have run and conducted a large amateur orchestra and choir for 30 years called EC4 Music. And this is about 5 minutes about my relationship with St. Bride's and its importance. The key vision for our choir, which we helped to shape in 1994 in St. Bride's actually, was a non-auditioning inclusive group which allowed city-based workers who were also musicians of all standards to continue to pursue or rekindle their passion for music on their own doorstep. And we've since then, over the last 30 years, we've done 9 concerts at the Barbican, 2 at the Royal Festival Hall, 1 here at the Guildhall. We did the Verdi Requiem in 2012 with the trumpets on the balcony, and about 60 at city churches, 32 at St. Bride's, 10 at St. Sepulchre, 8 at St. Clement Danes. We have an average choir of about 100, average orchestra of about 50, and over 30 years with 2.5 concerts on average per year, that's 11,000 people. And if you include the audiences, which range from 300 at St. Bride's to 2,500 at the Royal Festival Hall, that's more like 50,000 people. EC4 Music is much more than a platform to perform music. It's a social and community hub for participants, the place to make friends and connections, the platform and opportunity to achieve excellence and pride outside the workplace, reconnecting friends and family through audiences. We've had 10 marriages from the choir, and an EC4 music-based choir has sung at most of them. My social network is about 75% EC4 music, and we've had many people there for 20 plus years. Why am I saying this? Because as far as I can recall, every single choir rehearsal and about 90% of all of our orchestra rehearsals over that 30 years have taken place in churches. They are large, open, welcoming, clean, well-maintained, accommodating, got good facilities, efficient administration. They're cheap to hire. They don't disturb the office space, and some of them got incredible acoustics. This here is my little prop. This is the key to St. Bride's Church, because tomorrow evening I am taking an orchestra rehearsal with about 40 string players who will turn up on St. Bride's. We will rehearse for 2.5 hours. Tomorrow evening, we'll lock the church up at the end and we'll all go home. Without a shadow of doubt, we would not have flourished and may not have even survived or perhaps even been born, given the very first meeting was at St. Bride's Church, without St. Bride's Church and their assistance and their help. I cannot underestimate the contribution that the city-based churches have made to our group, and we are one of many. We're one of the larger ones, and I cannot thank them enough. And perhaps just a brief postscript. As a city lawyer for 23 years, I started off in Fleet Street, went to Eastcheap and then Chancery Lane. The city has a small residential population, but to many workers there, it's like your second home. You build strong friendship groups, and it's stressful, it's fast-paced. you are charged at premium rates, you earn an excellent salary, you're expected to work hard. There's definitely more of a focus on mental well-being in the workplace than there was when I first started in 1994. But ultimately, the person who knows you best and knows what works best for you is you. And quite a lot of this remains your own business and your own self-assessment. And to have these beautiful, welcoming, spacious, quiet buildings on your doorstep is a blessing and a joy. And like I say to the choir at the beginning of rehearsals, you can leave your office day at the door for a few minutes and pick it up again when you leave. I know of many colleagues who find the tranquility and beauty of the churches, both inside and out, so important and nourishing. It feels like another peaceful place. If I've had a bad day, I knew where I could go to reflect and where the door would always be open and where I'd always be made to feel welcome. I can't understate the importance of these local and totally unique resources.
You mentioned about because one of the things about a venue for sort of arts and leisure and bits and pieces, that we dealt with that, didn't we, in week one when we talked about cultural. So the corporation suggested, I think what we'll do is we'll get the corporation just to do an initial response and then we'll move on a little bit. Otherwise we'll end up sort of losing track of where we're at. So Mr. McNichol.
Thank you very much. I think I'm right in saying, but I'm not certain on this, so do correct me if I'm wrong, that the changes that are being proposed here weren't included in representations that were made during the Regulation 19 stage or in Matters statement, just the specific changes that are being proposed, or am I incorrect on that front?
I don't believe so. No.
Thank you. That's useful to understand just for my clarity. So I think there are a number of changes that we've made or suggested to make through to the city plan. Sorry, I'm just trying to get them up in front of me. Okay, sorry. And I think I'd refer you in particular to proposed change PC 13. Now, this is a change to the supporting text at what would be paragraph 3.1.5. And we reference that the city's many churches and other faith communities, including Bevis Smart Synagogue, make a highly significant contribution to the life of the city and its built environment, that they play an important social, community and civic role and are a significant part of the architectural and historic character of the Square Mile, are visitor destinations that provide cultural experiences, as well as providing many of the city's open spaces. So I think that's something that we took from the representations that were made to the city plan and felt that there was a proposed change that we could make to absolutely recognise the role that churches and the city's other faith communities play within the Square Mile. We've also made some other changes, and we'll come on to talk about noise in particular, around recognising places of worship, including churchyards. In policy HL3, we would propose a change to that policy to recognise that those are also noise-sensitive uses, as I know that that's something that is of concern, or has been raised as matters of concern. Turning to the changes that we've put together following discussions around culture and visitors, we have also proposed a change, which is PC 54, a new paragraph 7.3.4, which would identify that churches and other places of worship are a key component of the overall visitor experience and help create the distinctive look and feel of the city, and that they provide many facilities that visitors require as well, and they also attract visitors with a diverse cultural, historic and religious offer. There are a number of policies within the plan that also seek to protect churches, and policy S1 part 12 also references the need for protection and protecting and enhancing existing community facilities, which would of course include churches, allowing for relocation where justified and providing new facilities where required. So I think our feeling is that there is quite a lot in the plan already that goes a fair way to seek to ensure we retain our churches as an absolute minimum, but also to enhance those churches and to recognise the really varied role that churches play. I think those proposed changes in particular would assist in flagging that. So I think further changes to policy S1, I'm not sure that's necessary for the plan as it currently stands, given the other changes that we're proposing here.
Thanks for clarifying that. I think since we're talking about health, inclusion and safety, I think the point we are trying to make is not only, which we've covered in matter 6, around the importance culturally of the churches, but with the expansionist nature of the city plan and the fact that more buildings will be made, there'll be more people, more workers, this will have a massive impact on mental health, which is already at crisis point. So I think the point we're trying to get over today, and that this is why I would really like your permission to invite the other speakers to say a few words, would be to demonstrate that very important point that there are no spaces in the city where people can just wander in without having their bags checked and have a moment of tranquility where, you know, suicide rates are at a huge amount at the moment.
I absolutely agree, and 100%. There's no, I don't think there's anybody in the room that disagrees. But is there anything in the plan that prohibits that or stops that or puts barriers to that happening? Because is there something fundamentally wrong with the plan where that is? And don't forget, this is a spatial plan. This is just bear with me a second. This is a spatial plan, isn't it? This is to set out how, and obviously everything interconnects, and there is, obviously an impact with mental health, but you can't include absolutely everything in this plan, because there are other elements of what the corporation does or what central government does in terms of mental health and bits and pieces. So this has to be focused on the role it needs to do, and if it strays too far away, it loses that sense of focus and sense of purpose. But the question back to you is there anything in the plan that prohibits the churches that provide an absolutely excellent sort of service and facility and degree of respite and support for the whole community, including visitors, the homeless? Is there anything in the plan that stops them doing that?
It
just a simple yes or no.
It doesn't stop that. And I would argue that if we're going to mention the churches in areas like culture and heritage, it would be important to mention the church's work in society and in community, because people will read the plan, it'll flow through to actions, and then it'll remind everyone making decisions that there's a fantastic community resource which is not necessarily being recognised in the city plan, so it may be overlooked again.
Dr. Davis.
Thank you, Inspector Bridgewater. Just a very brief introduction. I'm here on behalf of St Benet's Welsh Church, which is tucked down by the City of London School and is easily overlooked because it perhaps didn't get quite the sympathetic treatment in the redevelopment of that area 50 years ago. And we're not the most accessible of city churches. But I have a question for you, Inspector. I absolutely understand your question. Is there anything that prohibits? The real concern that I had when I saw the draft city plan, and the reason why we responded at length from St Benet's, is that I absolutely accept there's nothing there that prohibits what we do, and I would like to add that, that there is a confusion in the English language. Church is often used to refer to bricks and mortar or stone. Actually, a church is a congregation of Christian people. And I'm not convinced that that is picked up. The question I have is, if there isn't a greater acknowledgement of the churches as Christian communities, are we at some point in the future going to be disadvantaged when proposals come forward and we say, hang on a minute, this proposal could be detrimental to this Christian congregation? And somebody says, but that's not in the plan, so we don't have to think about that. So I think my real concern is, if we are not explicitly recognised in the plan, are we at risk in future of being marginalised? And that, I suspect, is a technical question about planning law. But that's my biggest concern, that if we're not seen, then in future we can be ignored.
Mr. McNichol.
Thank you, Inspector. I mean, I do think, sorry to repeat myself, but I think it is worth just pulling this out. I mean, the City Corporation absolutely recognises the role of churches in the city. They are a really fundamental part of the city's community in just an incredible amount of different ways. You know, nobody's denying that at all. And we need the churches to continue their role, to expand their role, and to grow and to continue what they're doing. 3.1.5, so that would be in addition to this chapter, does talk about the city's many churches and other faith communities making a highly significant contribution to the life of the city and its built environment. They play an important social, community and civic role. So that's recognising that really varied and overarching role that the churches have. It's not simply about the cultural aspects, that's also a really important part of what churches do. But that's something that I think is really vital. To answer the specific questions about equality law and about the Human Rights Act, those are protections that were in place already. The Human Rights Act protects various people's rights to belief and to religion, and the Equalities Act also requires equality impact assessments, planning applications where that's relevant in relation to people's religious belief and in relation to wider beliefs as well. And I think those are fundamental safeguards which ensure that the planning system continues to take those issues into account. So hopefully that gives some comfort as to the way the planning system operates and considers these issues in the round. But I do think that adding this proposed change to this chapter would go a long way in making it really clear within the plan itself of the varied role of churches. I'm more than happy to have a conversation about the specifics of the wording of that proposed change if there's feedback on exactly how it could be phrased. But I think that's the mechanism here that we think would be an appropriate solution.
Reverend Mottershead.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm the Reverend Mottershead. I'm actually a city worker. I have and continue to work in the city for 35 years. I was 15 years at Ernst & Young, where I lived in the US, Singapore, and back in London. I was their global head of risk. And I have now since then worked in 3 private businesses. I am currently the chief financial officer and head of compliance for a fintech that does banking for the unbanked across the Middle East. So I do that alongside being the rector now at Holy Sepulchre, where I've been a priest in the city for about 10 years, but particularly at Holy Sepulchre, the National Musicians Church, for the last 4 years. In leading into 2 comments I particularly wanted to make, if that's so, 2 areas, one about music and well-being and health, and secondly about, and I think Rob, I think this connects into your point particularly of how explicit this is needed. If I touch on first, like many of our city churches, we have regular concerts and recitals open to the public. However, alongside those, we have various free, carefully designed community events with specialist staff to engage with music, art, creativity, history, and heritage. And we find that these weekly and monthly community groups are a lifeline to many people in the community, and that's elderly people, that's homed and homeless, that's neurotypical and neurodiverse, city workers and those retired, and many with mental health challenges, those living with dementia and their carers, dealing with exhaustion, loneliness, social exclusion, and isolation. I regularly hear stories on a weekly basis of people confirming that we are life-saving. Notice I've not used the word church here. or faith or Bibles at this point. This is a place of safety, of security, of sanctuary, of peace, however we want to define that. That they are life-sustaining, life-confirming, and of people finding these are one of the few places that they can unmask and be their true selves. Regularly hearing that. And I think that's therefore a challenge as to what are our places, and have we got enough places where people can be themselves, and do we need to be more explicit in ensuring all of these places are recognized and part of this? And I think it challenges the definition of, into my compliance role, as to how explicit a statement is. Does it prevent something, or does it need to promote something and ensure it happens? And I do believe in the context of well-being, about enabling a place for all people to feel welcome. As somebody who loves our city, genuinely, but I'd love it to be better for all people. And in doing that, I see rich or poor, faith or no faith, homed or homeless, well or unwell. The mutuality of these spaces is significant and important. And if we don't create and ensure we have a space like these, I think we will, metaphorically, apologies for saying this, be nudging people to the edges of our buildings. And in one respect, I, as a city worker, I'm fed up with losing my friends. And as a priest, I'm fed up with burying them. I would love us to have more safe places where people can unmask, where people can be themselves, where people can be ready to express themselves safely. Now, there is much evidence to support what I'm saying here, that carefully designed and staffed community activities can increase social capital, and not just general and mental health, but self-esteem, agency, frailty, quality of life, and more. There is the research from the Arts for Health and Wellbeing from 2017, the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Creative Health, that suggests engagement with music can significantly increase social emotion and cognitive benefits for all people, and reduce agitation and the need for antipsychotic medication in 67% of people with dementia. I can provide lived in experience of stories of people coming to us and their carers week in, week out, because there isn't other places for them. If you listen to or read the World Health Organization, who find groups arts activities foster social cohesion, reduce loneliness, and build community, and increase the capacity of a community's empathy and cross-cultural understanding. And the UK government's report from November of 2024 of the about culture and heritage capital by the Department of Culture, Media and Sport indicates cultural and heritage engagement can deliver £8 billion worth of improvements to people's life and higher productivity. Coming that view of what the churches provide, and I apologies to be carefully saying this, is that these venues, these locations, when they, in addition to the other things that they provide, and I think that's the distinction I'm trying to make here, is that when we provide carefully designed music, art, and creative activities with the right trained staff, which we as the National Musicians Church in our role in the city see as key, and that we learn from external evidence, which is continued to involve heritage social prescribing and all the range of that, I believe, as we continue to capture our own research-based impact and extend the range of activities, we can have an enormous contribution, alongside some of the things you're saying, to the well-being and culture and heritage of our city, which I don't believe, if it's not explicitly said, will form part of any strategic plan, because I've already seen it. If you look at the examples of social prescribing, and whether we have a view of that at the moment as an emerging discipline, when you look and try to connect up to the link workers, what you can see, if it's not explicit, is that's too hard. If we don't say that we need a connected up approach to health and well-being, utilize the spaces that contribute that way, I do not think and believe they will happen. And I say that as a regulatory and compliance specialist, not as a vicar. As a second aspect, please, if you don't mind, the shorter, please, thank you, is in respect of homelessness. And I say, alongside many city churches, historically some who were involved in SWEP, and I know that's not the case, but has been, and that offer, I believe, is always there as a part of that emergency provision. We, as a group of churches, provide warm and safe spaces regularly. Many of them are providing free hospitality, toilet services, not just 1, 2, but 5, 6, 7 days a week, and access like at Holy Sepulchre to free hospitality, conversations, and we have regular visitors and regular people who are looking for support and counselling and signposting. Again, if we aren't seen as a signposting part, we are not used as it. So there is a question as to if you go into our foyer, where is the corporate signposting of services? I put it up. But I'm okay to do that, just so we're clear. I will join in with you. I love the city. I want it to be better. But I do believe we should be better at signposting these things. We should be more connected up. And if I go on to a little bit more about how, so at Holy Sepulchre, we coordinate the Generosity and City of London's Hygiene Bank initiative, which is supporting rough sleepers and homelessness charities, supporting Thames Reach, Centrepoint, Under One Sky, Islington Child Services, Camden Sexual Exploitation Unit. We supply and support 20,000 families and individuals. We've given out 70 tons of hygiene and related products, and we're doing major food in collaboration with City Thameslink. Sorry, with City Harvest. Again, I think one of the interesting things about this is that, and if we take our collaboration with Thames Reach at the new city's Rough Sleeper Assessment Centre, which is behind the church on Snow Hill Court. If you haven't been there, you should be there. It's an amazing journey to help resolve and deal with a issue around rough sleepers and homelessness, and how do we help with the need to learn. We are enormously impacted, and I will always be, and my colleagues know this, 110% supportive of it. Constantly we're impacted by it. We do not form part of that plan because we aren't explicitly in the plan, and yet we provide a tote bag. So every homeless person, when they arrive there, and I would compare it to any of us who perhaps gone to an Airbnb and there isn't a bottle of wine and a bit of bread, they have, when they arrive, a tote bag in their little room so that they know, in addition to the amazing Thames Reach staff who understand how to help them on the journey, that guess what? Somebody cares. They don't get given it 2 days later. It's there hanging on the door just to say, guess what? We care for you. We care how you look at yourself. And again, if we aren't explicit in these plans, if we aren't explicit in being seen as part of that connected solution, I believe, as is already happening, that unless I run over, and we have a good relationship with Thames Reach, I can promise you, we do our best. But I do believe that you could achieve so much more. I'm not saying it's easy, but I think there are some easy wins by saying, guess what? Explicit reference to some of these connections. And I say, come back to those two, the real deal of well-being and social inclusion for all people, city workers or not, homed or homeless, and the connectedness of enabling all to feel good in our institutions and agencies. We will fail, sadly, if we don't make it more explicit. Thank you.
Mr. Randall.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to follow up after Dr. Davis's comments and Robert Nichols' comments. I know a number of people around this table with my planning consultant's hat on as planning consultant working with major developers in the square mile. We regularly consult with adjacent churches, development sites, and just following up what Mr. McNichol was saying, I think there are the safeguards in place. I hear what everyone's said this morning, but there are other documents, the Statement of Community Involvement, the requirements around that, the views SPD that has regard to the spires. There's also other documents relating to heritage, etc. So I just wanted to pick up on a couple of those points.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to sort of try and tease some of this out a little. I think we do have to recognise the role of the city plan. And yes, it's an overarching vision for the future of the square mile, but it's also a document that primarily is a tool to help guide development and ensure that development as it comes forward is achieving positive outcomes, achieving sustainable development. The City Corporation also has wider roles, of course, as a local authority and as a wider body as well. We do have a joint health and wellbeing strategy that's recently been adopted. We have a homelessness and rough sleeping strategy as well. I'm not familiar with every part of aspects of those two documents, but they are key documents for us in how we deliver the services that we provide and in how we work with partners to achieve that. I'm more than happy to put colleagues in touch, if they're not already, with those around the table who are part of helping achieve those solutions and to see if there's methods that can be taken forward or approaches that can be taken forward to work more closely together to achieve better outcomes in what we all do to achieve what are clearly our shared aims around all of this. I do think I'd reiterate my comments that I made earlier around the proposed change that we made. If there are specific changes that could be made to that to make sure that we are fully recognising the role that churches, both their buildings and their communities, their congregations and their services are playing in the life of the city, then I'm very happy to make those changes.
Does anybody else have anything they wish to raise with regard to the policy S1 and the HL1 to HL9?
Thank you. How are we doing this question by question? How would you like to?
Yes.
Okay, right. So you've got our detailed comments on this. There's one point we want to debate here, which is the way that policy S1 doesn't conform with the London plan in terms of health inequality as a result of as a means of promoting good growth. And we said when we looked at objectives previously that we would come back to this. So the city plan's social objective 1.3, creating a more inclusive, healthier and safer city for everyone, that could actually be met without addressing health inequality. And the same is true of strategic policy S1's aims to enable all communities to access facilities. And what we want to focus on here is perhaps looking at health inequality at source rather than where we think the city plan is emphasising access to facilities. And there are two policy examples that illustrate this. I mean, I should say poor air quality and noise are major sources of health inequality, which could be addressed at noise. But if we're dealing with question one, then let's just look at two policy examples of this. The first being air quality. It's dreadful in the city. It's really poor, and it disadvantages a number of groups. Children, old people, anyone with an underlying health condition. And that's addressed in the London plan. I mean, the London plan says that because the CAS is so densely developed, an air quality positive approach should be applied to new development. That's shaded in HL2 and in the strategic policy 1, and we'd see no reason why this air quality positive shouldn't be part of the city plan, given all the data on dirty air and its impacts. The second policy example in this bit of what we want to say is about the urban heat island effect. That disproportionately affects groups like children and old people. It increases health inequality rather than reducing it. And in the city, this inequality is spatially concentrated. It's a direct result of commercial office development where air conditioning is designed to meet the needs of the office workers inside those buildings, and the waste heat is discharged to adjacent sensitive areas like housing, where the children and old people live, as well as high-risk sites like Bart's Hospital, where vulnerable people are cared for and where overheating doesn't just lead to inequality, it can sometimes lead to death and certainly to increased levels of poor health. So we say there's evidence in local context to support stronger policies to address this cause of inequality at source, and we would like to see policy S1 conforming further to the London plan with regards to addressing health inequality. I'll pause there, and then if you want to go on to the other questions, we can do.
Andrew?
Yeah, just to draw attention to our statement of common ground 13 with the Greater London Authority, which is available on our website. So paragraph 4.8 of that does specifically talk between the two organisations around air quality neutral and air quality positive approach of the London plan. We have also proposed changes PC7 to PC10 in relation to air quality, and if I can just find the correct reference, and that was to address specific comments made by the Mayor of London. So we believe that the approach within the policy is in accordance with the London plan and has some amendments to make sure that that's reinforced.
Could you just explain to the room what those suggested changes are?
Yes, I can do. So policy 8, proposed change 7 refers to the proposal impact on major developments. PC 8 talks about the air quality management areas, and PC 9 relates to the air quality strategy, and then PC 10 relates to the targets. But in relation to the Mayor's comments, it's paragraph 4.8 of the statement of common ground, where both parties agree around the air quality neutral and positive approach.
Seen that, Mrs. Lee?
Well, all I would say is I suspect the Mayor picks his battles with the city and has chosen not to fight too hard on this one. Our view is that because the air quality is so poor here, that a stronger approach is thoroughly justified.
Mr. McNichol.
Just to bring in a few wider issues as well. I mean, of course, air quality, first of all, just to say we absolutely recognise that health inequalities are something that the planning system and this city plan are seeking to address. It's not simply a matter of improving health generally. Health inequalities needs to be addressed through what we do as well. There are many ways that health underpins spatial planning, as everybody around the table knows. Air quality is absolutely one of those, and that's why we have air quality policies within the plan and building on what the London plan is requiring as well. We also have other strategies that seek to address poor air quality. The transport strategy, for example, which seeks to significantly reduce the amount of trips by motor vehicles. That's both in terms of the pollutions that comes from tailpipes and the pollutants that we get from tyre wear, etc. We have seen real successes in the transport strategy, albeit, of course, that's outside this city plan itself. There are other things that we're seeking to do to improve air quality within the plan. A lot of our sustainability policies are aimed at this objective as well. We do have policy S15 on climate resilience and flood risk, which we'll come to which requires development to minimise the risk of overheating and any adverse contribution to the urban heat island effect. And then just one other thing to mention outside of the city plan as well, we're also developing a local area energy plan for the square mile. This is a really innovative and forward-looking piece of work because, of course, the city plan can only really tackle those buildings that come forward for development or redevelopment. Through the work of the local area energy plan, we're looking to ensure that more existing buildings can plug into heat networks within the square mile, can reduce their drawdown in terms of heating and cooling power, and ultimately all of that will help to ensure those buildings that exist within the square mile already are minimising their impacts in terms of pollutions that come from the powering of those buildings, the heating of those buildings, and in terms of things like the urban heat island effect, where they're putting heat into the atmosphere rather than reusing it as part of the buildings that come forward. So there's a whole sequence of things within the plan itself and other policies and strategies that we're undertaking that should help to address all of these issues.
Got anything else? Right, okay. Should we move to second question? And are the policies relating to health and inclusion positively prepared in a way that is aspirational but deliverable?
Yes, the policies in the city plan relating to health and inclusion are positively prepared in a way that is aspirational and deliverable. The policies will enable facilities such as community centres, educational and sports facilities to be developed, as well as improving air quality and reducing noise nuisance. The policies also seek to allow opportunities for community and spiritual interaction for the city's large working population, students and visitors. Strategic Policy S1, which expands the strategic objective of the plan, sets out a high-level vision for improving the health of the city's communities by providing a broad range of facilities and improving the environment. This vision is clearly expressed through policies HL1 to HL9, which supports development that promotes healthy lifestyles, reduces health inequalities, enabling health, social, educational, sports facilities, and improving air quality and minimising noise nuisance. These policies are aspirational as they deal with issues in the city on a large scale, which have wide-ranging impacts, such as improving air quality, fostering inclusion, and improving the community's health. These policies are deliverable and will be implemented through widespread developer-led engagement with local communities, production of health impact assessments and equality impact assessments, conforming with noise and air quality standards, and producing design and access statements. Large development schemes being processed through the planning application system in recent years have been submitting health impact assessments which seek to mitigate harmful impacts and have resulted in the development of a healthier city.
Mr. Parker.
Good morning, sir. Just to introduce myself, my name is Jack Parker of Council. I'm here to speak on behalf of the Barbican Association. I wasn't here at any of the previous sessions, but I have watched them back on YouTube. So I am, well, I'll leave that to you to judge, sir. So I am familiar with what was said, and I'll try not to repeat myself. Although there was some overlap, I think, between some of the things that were discussed and the points we want to make today. So if I do repeat myself and you want me to stop, do just say, or repeat what's already been said. If I may just make a couple of general points, and then I have some specific points on air quality, noise, and then sport and play provision policies. And I've got some specific points about the wording of the policies to deal with. I do say these points go to the soundness of the plan, but I'm hopeful that some of the points at least will be taken up by the city as being relatively uncontroversial. I'm in yours, Mr. McNichol's hands really as to whether you want me to do my whole thing or whether you want to deal with it in stages, but
Or just break it down. Should we do air quality first, then we'll do noise, and then we'll do the plane?
I'm grateful. If I can start with some general points. First, it's clear that this plan seeks to deliver a large increase in the number of workers
and visitors who will be coming to the city. And from the point of view of those people who live there, obviously that significant increase in numbers of external people coming to the city have potential impact on their lives, and in particular their residential amenity living in the city. And that very significant increase is something that the association feels strongly has not been properly accounted for within the plan in general. And each of my points will really go to that. The flip side of that is that we say it's striking that, for example, in the opening to the examination, lots of things were mentioned, but one thing that wasn't mentioned were the residents who live there. And if one looks at the main modification, I think that's now being proposed for the strategic vision, I'm looking at LD 29. There is now proposed to be a city plan vision, which again mentions lots of things. But strikingly, this is PC2, strikingly, and main modification 1, strikingly doesn't mention residents. Now, broadly speaking, I'll be corrected if I'm wrong about this. There are roughly 8,000 residents in the city. There are roughly 4,000 in the neighbourhood forum area, represented by Ms. Hurst to my right. That is a significant number of people in and of itself, and it is clear that the city want to increase the number of residents, and there are policies which seek to achieve that. And so we would say, as a general point, that the plan is not sound, it will not be effective unless it recognises, as part of its vision, the need to provide an appropriate standard of residential amenity for those who live there. And so we would ask that that is recognised in the city plan vision, and we have in our Reg 19 submissions, I think, proposed some particular wording which we say is necessary to properly reflect the role and the place of residents within the city corporation. So that's the first, that's our representation with respect to paragraph 1.1.0, 1.1.2. And obviously things have moved on now because we've got the proposed modifications, but we say that proposal can be properly reflected in the vision which the city are now proposing as their first main modification. It may be the city's receptive to that, but at least we say that goes to an issue of soundness. So that's the first general point. Then if I move on to my first specific point, which relates to air quality. Now, this straddles policy S1 and item 6C of policy S1, which was the kind of overarching strategic policy, and then at HL2, the specific air quality policy. I note firstly that there has already been a proposed modification, which is PC8. As I understand it from what was said today, as a result of conversations or engagement with the Mayor of London, and I just draw attention to that, which is that previously in the submission version of the plan, specific pollutants were mentioned at 3.3.0 of the plan. So specific mention was made of nitrogen dioxide and small particulate. Now that is now proposed to be deleted, and more general reference is made to national air quality targets not being met. And I assume, although I'll be corrected if I'm wrong, that is because there are national air quality targets in relation to other pollutants aside from those which were originally specified in the plan. So the point I'm about to make, I suspect, follows through and is a consistency point, really, by reference to the logic underlying this proposed amendment, because elsewhere in the plan, particularly item 6C and in policy HL2, specific mention is made of the pollutants which have now been deleted from the plan. And in short, our point is that the plan should not be merely specifying the pollutants which were specified, so nitrogen dioxide, PM10 and PM2.5, but should either specify all the pollutants which are of concern as identified in the council's own evidence base or in the World Health Organization guidelines or in the National Air Quality Standards, whichever document we want to go to. So should I specify all the pollutants, or it should just make clear that it relates to the pollutants, and then it is clear by reference to other policy documents what those pollutants are. So that's the first point that we have to make about the air quality policy and the strategic approach and the specific policy. Do you want me to pause there? Yeah.
Basically, your concern is that by it being overly specific in that policy, it could have unintended consequences where people could just meet the requirement of the plan on with the named pollutants rather than the wider ones in terms of the air quality requirements.
Essentially, that's the concern. Yeah.
Mr. McNichol?
Yes, thank you. On these specific issues to do with air quality, I think I'm afraid we'll have to go away and come back to you on this. We did update, we adopted a new air quality strategy fairly recently, and I believe those changes that we've put into the plan are to ensure that we're aligned with that new air quality strategy. But I need to have a look and speak to our colleagues working in the air quality team to ensure that we can answer the specific questions. But just to fully understand, the concern is that either we should have incorporated, we should be spelling out all of the pollutants, or we should be cross-referencing another document that does so.
Or not specifying any pollutant, and then it's clear that when it refers to pollutants in general, it refers to whichever pollutants are of concern, which will be set out in other documents. I suppose I would not want to tell the city how to draft its plan. I'm raising a point, which is that the plan as drafted isn't soundness. I think there are probably a number of ways in which it could be resolved. So I don't think it's probably for me to tell the city how to modify the plan necessarily, but any or each of those ways I would suspect could achieve the outcome that would resolve the issue.
I'll be very happy to have a look into this and come back to you, Inspector, with a suggested way forward. I'm not sure at this stage whether we agree that there's an issue here, but I'll certainly take it away and have a look as a matter of urgency.
Hurst, was this on air quality as well? Yeah, so we'll do. Yeah.
The city actually needs to go beyond the air quality strategy only really ties the city to the barest minimum legal requirements, and given the deficit that there is in air quality in the city, actually needs to go beyond that.
Just for me to confirm, Hurst, you're saying that the air quality strategy, which I haven't seen, but you're all referring to, you're saying that it meets the legal requirements, but you're saying it's just like the minimum. So you're not saying that the corporation's falling below legal requirements. You're just saying it meets them, and you're saying because of the unique nature of the city, you think the corporation needs to do more in this plan.
It's because the data on air quality is so poor in the city that simply meeting the minimum standards, even though that's the legal requirement, I mean, it's a pointless document because the legal requirements are there. So, you know, it really should be going beyond that.
Okay. Okay.
Then second point on air quality, which is a point which will also apply to noise, and it's a point about the relationship between the plan and the city's code of construction practice. In respect of both the air quality policy and the noise policy, but I'll just make this point once now. We consider that in order for the plan to be effective and to meet a concern that you raised, Inspector Bridgewater, in an earlier session, so that everyone knows where they stand, where development proposals come to be considered at a DM level, and when planning permissions are granted and when conditions are enforced. We say that there should be explicit reference to the COCP as a matter of policy within the policy requirements, the effect of which would be to make it a policy requirement that the COCP and the restrictions and controls within it are complied with, and that compliance with the COCP is thereafter. The obvious way to do that at a DM level would be to make compliance with the COCP a condition of the planning permission. It's right to say that as drafted, the plan refers to the COCP within the reason justification at various points as providing, and I quote, guidance as to how the requirements of the policy may be met. But we say, and in my experience, in particularly in other London boroughs, but in other plans as well, making compliance with the COCP a condition of the policy doesn't unduly restrict the corporation. It doesn't provide a fetter on the grant of permission, but it enables everyone, when planning applications come forward, to know where they stand and how they will be handled. And we would challenge the corporation to explain why it shouldn't be a policy requirement, that the expectation in policy terms is that planning permission should be granted subject to a condition that the COCP be abided by. It is the corporation's code of construction practice. One would expect it to be followed. Now, we all know when it comes to the DM level, if there's some particular reason why permission should be granted contrary to the policy expectation, then that can be achieved. There's that flexibility in the planning process. But as a basic starting point, one would expect the corporation's own COCP to be an acceptable basis on which planning permission should be granted. And we say that in order for the plan to be effective, transparent, so on, that needs to be incorporated into the policy requirements. We can't see why the city would object to that, given that it's their own COCP. The concern, and it's set out, I'm not going to go into what's said at, sorry.
I was just going to say, if I was persuaded to do that, given that the COCP has not been put before us to examine, and it's not been subject to independent examination, would you potentially be visiting the plan and the policy in another place, maybe, because of it, or could the plan? Because obviously I can't consider something I haven't seen, and obviously it needs to be tested like that. And now it may work perfectly, and it's probably highly likely that it's probably largely consistent with other construction COPCs across London boroughs and across the country. But again, it's not before us, and to link a policy to adhere to that would potentially cause problems because it's not examined, have we? So that whilst I think there is clearly you're making a point, and I think there's probably some merit in sort of flagging that, but actually having it as a policy would be difficult for us, because obviously I think that it would leave the plan open to challenge.
Can I just turn my back for 1 second? I'll come. Two points on that. Firstly, as a matter of principle, I hear what you say, but I don't think there'd be any problem in legal terms in the principle of a planning policy which required adherence to the COCP, even though the COCP itself wasn't before the examination. That is common to many plans, and indeed many underlying plan documents that might be referred to in a local plan may change over time, and the plan may be adopted and found sound, or found sound and then adopted on the basis of references to documents which are subsequently superseded. And indeed, COCP is an example of that. Plan adopted by reference to a COCP, which is then subsequently amended. The other slight concern I have, which is a point that's been made by Ms. Smith, is that the plan makes reference to a great many documents in its policies and reason justification, many of which are not before you either. So if that is a concern on your part, then it's a concern which should probably concern you in respect of
the wording of the actual policies in the boxes don't require adherence, or if they I've not picked up any of the policies, because obviously it's one of the things that we sort of go through with a fine-tooth comb. See Wandsworth, see Richmond, see Spelthorne, see see Birmingham. Yeah. It is one of those things. Now, there's absolutely no issue, to be fair, in raising, especially in terms of construction noise and disruption, raising that. And obviously some of the plan policies do contain a reference, rather than linking to a specific document. There is potential, maybe, and obviously we need to let Mr. Nicol respond to this. We probably will take a break in a second, but there is potential there for saying that those issues, construction issues, noise, disturbance, that should be considered, rather than limit listing it to a specific policy that sits outside the plan. So you can raise those issues if there is a justification, but I'll let Mr. Nicol. Yeah,
just so I can finish off, and then he can deal with everything at once rather than it being back. The reason why this is a concern is because, set out in the Reg 19 submissions, the experience of the association has been that very often there has been a lack of clarity as to what is required by way of construction. And that there have been significant construction impacts. And of course, I understand you will say, and others may say, well, you're living in the City of London, there's going to be construction, that's part of daily living. I accept that. But the real question is not whether there's going to be construction in the city. The question is it being managed in a way that is transparent, predictable, in compliance with objective standards that everyone can look at and say, yeah, this is how it's going to be, or this is a general expectation of how it's going to be, because there's always scope for variation of that. And that as matters stand, in the way that the plan isn't drafted, that isn't there. And so it's not, we say, an effective means of managing those impacts when there is so much uncertainty as to how they will be handled. And I just come back to, there is the COCP. One would expect the city to consider that to be an appropriate basis for dealing with construction. And therefore, that's why we say linking it explicitly to the city's own document would provide everyone with the clarity that they are, we say, entitled to by this plan in terms of how construction will be handled. So that's why the concern has arisen. And I'm not going to go through all the evidence in the reps, but it's set out there.
Nicol.
Thank you. So, yeah, I mean, I think the plan is pretty clear on this. We have within HL2 Part 7, which talks about construction and deconstruction, transport materials carried out in a way that's to minimise air quality impacts to the fullest extent possible. That's in relation to air quality specifically, and ensures that construction and deconstruction is doing what the policy is seeking to achieve. And then the supporting text in terms of how it talks about how the policy works, which I think is actually quite a helpful way of framing a policy to kind of expand on the policy and its implementation. Paragraph 3.3.3, the City Corporation's Code of Practice for Deconstruction and Construction Sites and the Mayor's Control of Dust and Emissions during construction and demolition SPD provide guidance on procedures to be adopted to minimise the impacts of demolition and construction activities on air quality. So it's a clear expectation that we've set out within the supporting text as to how the policy should work, which is to adopt that approach. And we've taken a similar approach in terms of noise, 3.4.4. We've said again, guidance and procedures to be adopted to minimise these things. And we've taken a similar approach at 10.2.8, that's in relation to transport. The full construction logistics plan will be required by condition with outline details required at the application stage. A CLP should comply with the measures set out in the Code of Practice for Deconstruction and Construction Sites. So I think this is working well as it stands. The construction logistics plan is a document that changes fairly frequently. It's on it now, it's 9th edition. It covers everything from non-mobile machinery to unexploded ordnance and everything in between. So, you know, I think it's right for us to have a policies that look to achieve things, improve air quality, reduce impact, noise impacts, and then refer to the documents through which we will do that in the How the Policy Works section.
Mr. Parker.
I think that's me on air quality.
We've done an hour and a half. It's quite warm in here, isn't it? So should we take a break for 15, 20 minutes? You can get a cup of